Welcome to the Virginia is for Laughers podcast, brought to you by X2 Comedy. If you're looking to get more out of your Shenandoah Valley experience, then this is the podcast for you. You'll meet interesting people, musicians, and comedians that perform here and find out more about what you can do and see. Whether you live here or plan to visit, listen to explore what makes our unique slice of heaven. Now here's your host, Don Davis Womack.
Hello, Laughers. I'm thrilled to have some extraordinary guests with us today who are at the heart of one of the Shenandoah Valley's most captivating artistic institutions. The American Shakespeare Center's Blackfriars Playhouse has been delighting hundreds of thousands of audience members from all over the world, where they bring the magic of Shakespeare's world to life in ways that both entertain and enlighten. Today, we are joined by Leah Wallace, the Education Programs Manager, who brings a wealth of insights into the world of stagecraft. Also, Aubrey Whitlock, the Associate Director of Education Programming, who plays a pivotal role in bringing Shakespeare's timeless tales to learners of all ages. In this episode, we'll delve into how the American Shakespeare Center recovers the joys and accessibility of Shakespeare's theater, language, and humanity by exploring the English Renaissance stage and its practices through performance and education for kids to adults. So, without further ado, let's step into the world of Shakespearean drama, education, and programming with our esteemed guests. Welcome to the show, Leah and Aubrey. It's great to have you on today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for being here. I'm honored to be esteemed.
Yes.
You are esteemed, and I'm honored to be in your presence to talk about this because this is so great. I have been myself personally to enjoy performances at Blackfriars Playhouse, and it's been a delight each and every time. And I was aware that you provided some educational opportunities, but until prepping for this interview, I had no idea the extensiveness of it. So I'm really eager to talk with both of you today to learn more and share it with the laughers. I want to start here, ladies. Can we start with what you provide and the overview of the history and mission of Blackfriars Playhouse and its place within the American Shakespeare Center?
Sure. I'll take that one. Mm-hmm. So the American Shakespeare Center began as a classroom experiment between a professor of English at James Madison University, Dr. Ralph Allen Cohen, and one of his students, Jim Warren. And Ralph was a professor at JMU for over 30 years. He started their studies abroad program, and he was very much an English professor. So he's studying these words of Shakespeare's plays on the page. But doing all these trips to London with his students, he was seeing a lot of theater, and it's really hard to keep things on the page when you're doing so much with the stage. And so they started working in his classroom on actually getting up and staging the shows in various ways. And they started to work with what we call Shakespeare staging conditions, because Ralph was thinking about the fact that every room Shakespeare worked in during his lifetime had the same basic architectural setup. And perhaps that architectural setup impacted the way the plays were performed. And perhaps that fact of performance impacted the way the plays were written because they had to be performed in this particular style. So this classroom experiment saw in 1988, the Ralph's class do a production of Henry V using these Shakespeare staging conditions in which Jim Warren got to play Henry. And they the big three things I like to say about our staging conditions are we do it with the lights on, so everybody can see each other. We do it on a thrust stage, so the audience is surrounding the actors on at least three sides, and we do it live and unplugged. So with no permanent stuff. So really the words are the primary thing that the actors have to tell the story, because that's what Shakespeare had. And they had so much fun in class doing this classroom experiment that legend has it, after the performance, they were all sitting in a Hardee's, and Jim said to Ralph, "That was so great. We should do it again. We should do it a lot. We should have a company. Just give me $200 for posters and broadswords." And Ralph wanted to say, "That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard." But because he was a teacher who was teaching that it wasn't stupid, he instead said, "Sure." And thus the American Shakespeare Center was born out of that classroom experiment. And we spent our first 10 years as a company touring as the Shenandoah Shakespeare Express. And we really brought this stripped down, accessible Shakespeare to all sorts of different playing spaces. After about 10 years of touring, we figured it would be, it's a lot easier to recreate Shakespeare staging conditions if you have a stage that recreates those conditions. So we started looking around for a place to build a permanent home. And we opened the Blackfriars Playhouse in Stanton, Virginia in 2001. And we've had a resident troupe performing in that building year round and a touring troupe out on the road, continuing the legacy of the Shenandoah Shakespeare Express up until the pandemic halted our touring operations. But we are hopeful to get them restarted as soon as we can, so that we can get back out on the road that way. But that has really shaped our spot in the theater scene. So we, when we built the Playhouse, we dropped the Express from our name and became Shenandoah Shakespeare in 2001. And then in 2005, we rebranded completely as the American Shakespeare Center because our reach has long been beyond just the Shenandoah Valley. And we are doing this investigation of how we can recover the accessibility of Shakespeare stage that really nobody else is doing. And we've become a kind of hub for this sort of scholarship and exploration of performance of working in this style. And so people know that when they're coming to a show at the American Shakespeare Center, they're going to get top quality text work and a lot of that alive and vital quality that we believe our evidence shows that Shakespeare's original Playhouse has had.
Wow.
She was a former tour guide for us. That's how she got her start. Can you tell?
Yes, that was incredible. Just a wonderful summary of your history and the impact early on that now continues in that marriage between Shakespeare and scholarship. Mm-hmm. Now, Leah, you are the education programs manager. So I would like for you to also share some insights into the unique experience of staging the Shakespeare plays in the recreated indoor playhouse.
Oh, I would love to. The favorite comment that I get in my job from audiences who see our plays goes something along the lines of, thank you for modernizing the language. And
yes.
I say, we didn't. We didn't do that. You understood it because it's English and you speak English. And isn't that great? Because a lot of people have had the experience that we call here Shakesfear. So the fear of Shakespeare, right, that's kind of been given to them by, bad high school English experiences.
Yes.
Having a bad experience with Shakespeare, usually on the page. And the joys and the rewards and everything of staging Shakespeare in these conditions is that it removes everything that's between you and the story and also adds things that we forgot were options for these plays. For Shakespeare, there was no such thing as the idea of a fourth wall, right? Like a separation between actor and audience, because they had to perform with the universal lighting of the sun. Even in their indoor playhouses, they had windows that allowed light to stream in so that everybody could see each other. And there's no real convention of lighting the stage more than the house until we get the invention of like gas powered lights much, much later, right? So,
right.
So staging Shakespeare's plays in a room where the actors can't see the audience removes a lot of options that Shakespeare gave his actors originally. And now Shakespeare didn't write me a letter telling me this because he's dead and I can't prove anything.
Oh, he didn't? I got one.
No, he's going to see me on things eventually.
Yeah.
I mean, really, but
he also don't have to reply all.
But when you just think about the architecture of the rooms that he worked in, and then you recreate that, right, by we know how big the Blackfriars Playhouse was. We have the dimensions of that space, right? And we know that the furthest seat away from the stage is still close enough for an actor standing center stage to make eye contact with that audience member. And we can use our audiences in the ways that Shakespeare likely used his visible and vocal audiences, right? And that is such a hallmark of early modern theater, the inclusion and the use of visible audience that things like film and Broadway can't really recreate. And so they have to shy away from it. And then you lose a lot of the jokes that are honestly like making fun of audience members or using or throwing, complicity out into the audience or using us as judge and jury or witnesses or army or whatever. And that's much harder to do when you can't see everyone. And it was a simple thing for us. We weren't like, and now we shall use the audience. We just turned on the lights, and then human brains do what human brains do. And we started to talk and listen to the other people in the room. And I think that's probably the thing that it's definitely the thing I get most excited about. And is a big eye opener for like how these plays have changed over 400 years in ways that have nothing to do with the plays themselves, but just the context in which they're put up. Did I answer the question?
Yes, but I have a follow-up question with that. You just said something that was making me think, oh, wow, what does she mean by that? Because I'm not in the Shakespearean world, even though I'm an actor and I've done a little bit of Shakespeare. That's not, the thing I've done. It's been more film acting and obviously comedy. But you just said 400 years, it's changed so much. What do you mean by that? Can you expand on that a little bit more?
I mean, how many hours do you want this podcast to run?
Brevity is the soul. I can do it. Yeah. I can do it fast.
Okay. So lots of ways. Okay.
Just like both in the sense that editors get in there and make decisions about the texts because we don't have just one version of them from Shakespeare, but also in the sense that like artistic sensibilities tend to reflect like political and cultural norms of the time, right? So like you can look at what different time periods you're interested in by looking at the ways that they staged Shakespeare. Like the Victorians cut a lot of text out of those plays and staged a lot of spectacle, right? So they would do productions that are 4 hours long, but only have a quarter of Shakespeare's text in them. But they sure have a lot of dances and music and sheep and set pieces and stuff. And those are things that like Shakespeare never had.
And they were the ones that gave us directors.
Yes.
So in Shakespeare's time, there was not one person behind the script saying, you must do this, move here now. There was no director at that time. It was all ensemble, collaboration up until, about 200 years after Shakespeare's period.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I didn't realize the director is almost a new role in ways.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. It's a fairly new invention in the theater industry. Yeah. Fairly new in relative terms. Less than centuries or so.
Yeah, that is new. It's such fun and fascinating information already, and we're just getting started. My next question for you is to Aubrey, actually. Could you walk us through the educational incentives offered by Blackfriars Playhouse?
Yeah. So what Leah and I do in the education department of ASC is we provide enrichment programming that supports whatever is on our stage. And that can range from, light touches of, with Shakespeare and with our programs. For instance, our Friday Night Lights On series, which is a pre-show lecture series experience. It's a pre-show experience. It's not just lectures. So like there's new content once a week before a show every Friday. So it's so very, Gen Pop oriented. We also have programs for kids starting as young as 8 years old with our drama club, moving into, our camp for teenagers that happens every summer. We have a camp for grownups that goes on and a drama club for grownups in the area too. So if people want to get involved, meet once a week for a couple of weeks and then do a staged reading, we have the No Kidding Drama Club. We have the drama club that does a half-hour performance at the end of each semester. So we have those kinds of programs. We also have sort of bigger events that we do coming up this fall. We have the Blackfriars Conference, which is a convergence of Shakespeare scholars and Shakespeare theater practitioners getting together at the Playhouse to talk about the intersection of page and stage and what we can learn from each other. We have leadership programs where we work with corporations like the Federal Executive Institute and Commonwealth attorneys. Pardon us.
That's okay.
So we take what we have learned from Shakespeare's language and we apply it in corporate settings for corporate management and professional development. And we have programs for teachers and teacher seminars that happen regularly throughout the year. So we really try to reach as many folks as possible at as many experience levels as we possibly can.
Wow. Again, very extensive and beautiful. Mm-hmm. I would like to ask if you could give a little bit more description about this series. You called it Lights On show?
Friday Night Lights On?
Yeah, Friday Night Lights On. That's what I wanted to go. So it's before the show that's playing, and people it runs what, an hour or two before the show?
It runs an hour. So it is every Friday that there is a show. So, for the, almost 52 weeks that we are open, we will have every Friday night, we will have an hour's worth of programming that is intended to enhance your enjoyment of and understanding of the show that you see either that night, right after, or that weekend. So, for instance, tomorrow night, we're doing a Q scripts workshop during that time to prepare folks to think about Much Ado About Nothing in a kind of a different way, and thinking about the technology of the Q script that Shakespeare used and Shakespeare's actors used to rehearse that play originally. So, and it varies from week to week. We'll have a scholar come in and lecture about something to do with one of the plays in our rep, or might be a discussion panel. It might be a partnership with another organization in our community where they come in and discuss sort of the overlap of their work and our performances and work. So the content varies every single week, but it is always entertaining and enriching.
All right. So that's just for anybody interested. Yep,
that is for anybody at all.
They do not have to be a theater student or
Totally.
Professor. Yeah. Just have interest in learning more about Shakespeare and show up. That's a beautiful program. I really like that. How do you all make Shakespeare accessible and engaging for the learners of all ages? That's one example. Then you've listed the kind of programs, but I think there's more to that than we just talked about. Can you expand on that?
Yeah. So part of it is our philosophy when it comes to dealing with Shakespeare's text, right? Which is to break it apart and look at it the way an actor looks at it. And so we're not dealing usually with like large thematic discussions about intention, or we're looking at the nuts and bolts of like, what does this text say we have to do? And how might we want to do that thing? And that keeps it a very active exploration instead of a kind of didactic like lesson or discussion or like heady exercise. It's very in the body, right? Even when we're like in our books with our pens and our thinking, right? So so that's a lot of our kind of ethos is very much about like what information can we glean from really close reading of the text. And I don't mean that in a woo-woo way about like how like Hamlet might be feeling. I mean, like, where is Hamlet standing on stage and what information does that give us? Because we can learn a lot from the outside in of like the stagecraft into the story. And that's a lot of what we try to do. And then we actually do it. And I think that's the thing that helps us make this whole shenanigan accessible to all ages, because all ages are going to have a lot of the same struggles when it comes to doing this exercise of putting on a play. I don't care if you're 8 or 80. It's vulnerable to get up in front of people and do a thing. It is hard to work on a project that is bigger than any one person, where you don't have all of the information yourself and you have to rely on others. And those skills that you need to get through doing something like that are useful for everything you're going to do in your life. So what we're approaching from a whole lifelong learning perspective is not, here's training to be an actor. It's training to be a fully engaged human being, right? Here's training on how to think about relationships, how to choose your words more mindfully, how to work together, how to know when to lead and when, perhaps more importantly, to follow, stuff like that. And so all of our programming comes with the component of get up and do the thing, right? Our drama clubbers who are our 8-year-old drama clubbers, they're going to perform Shakespeare's text, and our adult drama clubbers are going to perform Shakespeare's text, and our teenage campers are going to perform Shakespeare's text. And all of our workshops are going to involve some aspect of actually doing the thing. And that, I think, has made...
Yeah. And I think too, when it comes to just the language itself, for me, like the switch often happens when you say to people, well, the first line of Hamlet, arguably in some estimation, one of the greatest works of English literature of all time, the first line of Hamlet is "Who's there?" That's still our language. We often combat the idea that people say, oh, it's Old English, it's Middle English. No, it is not. You need an actual PhD to learn how to translate things from Old English and out of Middle English, like Chaucer.
When that opera with the Shower Suta, the Jock of Bar to parse.
Yeah, that's Middle English.
Wow.
That is not what Shakespeare wrote in. Shakespeare wrote in what we call early modern English, which means basically that most of the words are still present in our lexicon. We just use them differently sometimes, like the meanings have evolved, or, you know, some words have fallen out of use, but it's not that many of them. And things like, you know, our informal thou, thee, and thou pronoun, second person pronoun has fallen out of use. So like when you demystify that and when you just say that to people, often their brains just kind of switch off, like, oh, like this isn't what I thought it was. This is actually the English that mostly I speak, except the syntax is funky. So we just have to do a lot of that prefacing, you know, saying this actually is your language still. Yeah. Let's prove it to you. Here, let's do some stuff, you know.
Dr. Ralph Allen Cohen, our co-founder, he wrote a book for high school English teachers called Shakesfear and How to Cure It.
Oh, wow.
And I like to say that, you know, he has a cure for Shakespeare, which is the sort of demystifying and getting up and doing it and, like, you know, taking it off the pedestal thing. And the work that I do with the younger students in drama club, I call that the vaccine for Shakespeare, because if they're it is not too hard for them. And if we don't instill that idea that you're not going to understand this isn't for you. Right. At a young age, but instead just give it to them like we would anything else. Hey, they take to it just like they would anything else. Or perhaps they're not into it because they're not into theater or they're not into whatever, but it's not because Shakespeare is too hard or it's too advanced or whatever. Right. Like, and with those, you know, with those young students, like they're going to be theater goers for life. Like that's the vaccine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The exposure.
The exposure is important. You're doing a really exposure. Early childhood exposure. I like that. Yeah, I saw one of your videos of some young teenage campers on your website, and they're adorable. And they shared the impact of going to camp and the experience that they had there, and you could just feel, you know, their energy and excitement about what they experience. It was really wonderful. If you have kids and teenagers, laughers, you should definitely check out their website and watch that video here and show it to your youth. They might be interested in participating again if they've done it before. So yeah, it's pretty amazing, the programming. And you've mentioned in general what you have to offer, but can you highlight some of the standout events and activities that the programming team curates?
Absolutely. I'm going to start. I'm just going to talk more about our camp because it is a standout program.
It is.
So the ASC Theater Camp is a residential summer intensive for students ages 13 to 18-ish, rising eighth graders through rising college freshmen, or the equivalent for homeschoolers. And it is a 3-week-long program that is hosted by Mary Baldwin University. So students from all around the world come to Stanton, Virginia for 3 weeks. They live in a college dorm on a college campus. They audition on their first full day of camp to be cast into one of the session shows. And then they spend the next 3 weeks rehearsing that show with their cast and director and team to mount a full production in the Blackfriars Playhouse at the end of the session, in a full festival of plays. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff they do to make them do an extra showcase of scenes. They do music. Like it's still a summer camp. So like we have a talent show and a dance, and occasionally throw water balloons at them. But they are really engaging with this material at above a college level, really. I mean, and they're doing, they get to perform in the Blackfriars Playhouse before
that's amazing
high school, which is like bucket list item for a lot of professional actors. And these kids are getting to do it at such a young age. And I run it, so I'm biased, but there is nothing like it for anybody who is interested in doing this, but there's also nothing like it for anybody who is interested in not doing this. And by this, I mean theater or Shakespeare. Camp is a magical place. And it's a place where you find your people. And it's a place of radical acceptance. And so we have campers that, come for 6 years in a row. We have campers that might, come once or every other year, or don't find us until they're 18 or whatever. That's where the long con really gets its is hooks in. And it's the long con cultivation programming of this is, and I tell them over and over again, like, don't be actors. You can use this training for, like, it'll make you a better engineer or like whatever. But, a lot of them do get the bug and will go on to study performance in college or go on to do it professionally, but a lot of them don't. And I'm very proud of that it is a program about collaboration, about teamwork, about creation, and not about let's put you on a conveyor belt to Broadway. That's not what it's about.
Yeah,
it's about becoming a fully engaged human being. And so lifelong learning is a big part of it. Living on a college campus, navigating sharing space with a roommate, eating in a dining hall, being in charge of your own schedule. You're not. It's a lie. We make it. And they have 24-hour supervision, but we kind of make them feel like they don't. And it's a little bit of leaping into life after home with a bit of a safety net. And so very proud of that program. And they produce some really high quality work, like not for kids. High quality work, period. And all of their shows are available to watch on our YouTube channel. So it's just YouTube/ASC Theater Camp. And you can check out some of the work that they've done over the last 10 years, I think we've got up there.
Camp really is the jewel in our crown, and it has been around
since 1997.
It's been part of the company almost as long as the company has existed.
Mm-hmm.
So
wow.
It's, what was that, 25 years?
26 years. I have not been running it this whole time. I'm not that old.
I don't know. I don't even know if you were born then.
She was.
I was.
Okay. Very young looking and beautiful.
Yeah. We're extremely proud of camp. And I mean, talking about the long con, it just makes me think of like one of our directors this past summer was a camper and then was a camp counselor and now is an academic, teaching a professor of Shakespeare.
Wow.
And as a director, so we create pathways, but not pathways to Broadway, as Leah was saying, another program that thinking about, your audience, that I think people would be really interested in is the no kidding version of the adult version of the club and of the camp. So that is a only week-long intensive of adults. So if you've aged out of camp, of the teenage camp, you are eligible, as old as you want to be when you come to the No Kidding Shakespeare Camp. And it's a week-long sort of truncated version of what we do for the campers, but it's a little nicer because you get to stay at the hotel instead of and you put on a staged reading. So it's not quite as intense, but
it's intense.
Equally fun. Yeah. And you dive a little bit more into the text, and it's a week-long nerd fest really for the grownups around here. And it's a really fun way to make connections with other local people. And like I said, we sustain that in the fall and in the spring with a few sessions. So during the fall and springtime, because we know people are working professionals, usually the people that join us for this, it's on the weekends. We rehearse for a few hours for a couple of weekends, and then you perform on our stage, on a Sunday morning. And it's different plays throughout the year that are not necessarily Shakespeare, but they're from the period. They're from other writers who were, believe it or not, there are other writers who wrote during that time.
I don't believe it. I refuse.
Who wrote just wild and fun plays. So the one that we're going to do this fall, that'll perform on October 15 is a weird little play called The Witch of Edmonton. It's got a black dog in it that's like a ghost or the devil. It's a weird play. So sometimes we kind of resurrect more obscure texts for that program. So it's really fun to dive if you really like the early modern plays and Shakespeare plays. Diving into lesser known authors is a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So that's a program that we love and want everyone's participation in. I already mentioned our conference, which happens every other year. So every odd numbered year, you can expect another a really intense week at the end of October, usually, where academics and actors descend on us like locusts and nerd out for a week. And we're extremely proud of that. Those are really some of the biggest and best ones, I think. But you can find all the rest of them on our landing page. It's the Teach and Learn tab on the ASC website.
Yes, you definitely do stand-out work. And speaking, stand-up, that came to my mind as a stand-up comedian. But seriously, speaking of standouts, that is much ado about something incredible, I am gobbling on some deliciousness from our sponsor, Pre-Popster's Gourmet Popcorn, which happens to be Shenandoah Valley's only award-winning popcorn. Y'all ever tried it?
I have not.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Well, I'm going to send you some.
Can't wait.
Love it.
It's really good. Here's some quick fun facts to know. Their kernels are grown right here in the Shenandoah Valley, and their factory is 100% nut-free.
Except for the employees, I'm sure.
That is up to each person's discernment. But also, it is great for any gifting occasion, perfect for birthdays, anniversaries, literally anything. Perhaps even for performers after a play at the American Shakespeare Center.
Those actors be hungry.
They do.
I'm sure they would welcome it. It's amazing. And it also doesn't require you to know anyone's shirt, shoe, or pant size. It's perfect, right?
Best gift.
Yeah. Sounds
Best gift ever. And they are offering Preposterous to our laughers a 15% discount. Just use promo code LAUGH15 when you visit prepopsterous.com. That's prepopsterous.com and buy you some today.
It's great wordplay.
Yeah.
I love it too.
We love a good pun around here.
I bet you do. Theater people are so amazing with that, just even in their everyday conversation. It's delightful. I have some more questions for you. Aubrey, what are some of the challenges and rewards of bringing classic plays to life in a contemporary context?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this already, but I'll say it again because it bears repeating. Like, I think the biggest challenge most of the time that we find is just the sort of mental wall that people have for whatever reason. Like Leah said, it could be just a really bad experience in high school. Like your teacher somehow murdered Romeo and Juliet for you when it should have been a wonderful experience, so like helping people get over that Shakespeare hump.
Slightly immature. I'm sorry.
I held it together as long as I could. I know I did it. I'm sorry. But helping people get over that is, getting us back on track. I'm an adult. It's fine.
That's great.
So yeah, we're awfully disarming when people meet those challenges because of things like that. So that helps, just being who we are, helping people get over sort of their own blocks about Shakespeare's language and about staging things. And then of course, I think it really does help what we do in terms of like making a stage picture and teaching people how to read the stage the way you would read a page. Like everything has meaning when you look at it on stage, right? The placement of someone's body, the way that they're kneeling, not just the fact that they're kneeling, but is it one knee down or is it both knees down? Like, what does that mean? What are the connotations of those things? Helping people ground what they're doing in physical actions and then taking away the judgment from that. Like I know, when we lead workshops a lot, there's a lot of like, oh no, I'm not an actor. I have stage fright. Don't make me get up and read stuff. And it's like, no, really, I'm just going to distract you by making you think literally about where your body needs to be facing on stage, treat the stage like a dice, making it very concrete. And that just sort of, that I think that unlocks a lot of things for people when you can just think about the discrete elements of putting up a scene as opposed to being mired in what does it all mean? What's my character
the right
thinking?
answer?
What is the right answer? Where's the answer key?
There's no answer
there
key.
is not one. Another part of our philosophy is that these are all choices available to you. Some choices are stronger than others, but our programs are a place where you can experiment with those choices and figure out which one you like based on the story that you want to tell with the text. So we really believe that the text is a tool for telling your story, not necessarily you are not trying to replicate just Shakespeare's story, if that makes sense, right? It's not his story anymore. He's dead, right? It's ours now. So the choices you make in terms of how you put that up are up to you, and they are infinite in their variety.
And because you said stand up earlier, I just wanted to, because it reminded me that like a lot of the work that we end up doing, our actors in our space with our audiences is really similar to stand up comedy in that like, it's a lot of collaborative meaning making in that like the actors are constantly checking in with the audience to be like, are you with me? You are my partner too. Work with me, people. Right?
Yes.
You need the reactions of the house really impact what's going to happen on stage next. And like, and people aren't always like in a culture that's more used to like the movie theater, that like alive and vitalness people aren't always used to in live theater. And then especially with Shakespeare, which people, because of that Shakesfear, there's like an expectation that it will be boring or it will be very distant from you.
For me was a fire.
Solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve.
The John Gielgud days are done. No offense, no shade to John Gielgud. He had his moment. But.
And that like we're speaking to you instead of at you. Same and so that we are interacting with you in the same way that like a comedian set is not going to be the same if the audience is booing as it will be as if they're laughing, as it will be if they're stone silent, right? And that is the same vibe in our playhouse, and that I think is a huge challenge and a huge reward.
Yeah, it is a communication and interaction between yourself as a performer and the audience. And we are actually, I don't know if you guys are seeing this, but we're actually seeing that audiences really want more of that.
They do.
Interaction. Yeah. In a very positive way. It's positive energy for the most part, I think. At least that's what we're experiencing.
Yeah, we've never been able to experience anything else.
Yeah.
Our space really demands it. It demands that you participate. Right. We're going to make you.
Yeah. Like, when you leave the lights on, you're vulnerable to being spoken at or spoken to all the time.
Like
so
that rack. Yeah. And that was like the challenge of the pandemic. I mean, we cannot perform our plays to a camera. It's not the same thing. And like, and the way that our actors had to adjust to only being able to see eyes when we had masked audiences. I mean, it really impacts the way we perform and the way that the audience understands the performance, because the audience is such a huge part of it.
Yeah. That is amazing. Leah, can you expand and share a particularly impactful story of how exposure to Shakespeare's works has influenced the growth and development of a young learner?
Sure, I can. So I started the drama club, sort of the drama club for kids, as a kind of feeder program for camp that would be less time intensive, right? Less of a commitment, less of a cost, and for local kids, since it's going to meet weekly. And one of my first iterations of drama club, I had a young clubber. I think she was 10 when she joined, and she, outgoing kid. I don't know that she'd had any exposure to Shakespeare before this, and she lost her little mind. And when she found out that there was a camp that she wasn't old enough to go to yet, she waged like a 3-year sulk fest until she was allowed to come to camp. She slept with the complete works of Shakespeare in her bed.
Oh my goodness.
She started to do every theatrical opportunity she could. And then she was eligible. Her first summer at camp was last summer. And so she has come to camp, and she is now a camper and continues to come to drama club. And it is like, she is still very young, right? She's just starting her high school experience. The discovery when she was 10 of, oh my God, I love this thing, I think has really shaped the trajectory that she is going to send herself down in these next formative years to come. During the pandemic, we pivoted our camp program online because we had to. And I hope we never have to do that again, but I'm very glad that we were able to do that. We created a kind of residential experience in a computer screen. And I'm grateful we're able to do it, but mostly because we captured the interest of a student who would never have come to a residential program, who was not quite ready to do that yet, like to leave home for 3 weeks from a different state. It would have been quite a trip, but was willing to try this sort of virtual version first, and then lost their damn little mind. Sorry. Got very excited about doing this kind of work, this theater work, right? And then she came to in-person camp in 2021 when we opened back up in person. And she learned all about how to cut Shakespeare's text herself, because that was a big part of that camp that year. Took that knowledge back to her high school, went to her theater director and said, we're doing Macbeth this year. And her said, what? Who's going to get the script? And she said, I am. And she cut that play herself down to 90 minutes. She directed it herself.
Wow.
And now she goes to college at Mary Baldwin University here in Stanton, and is continuing to pursue a professional, educational and professional life in theater, and works with me on drama club, and never would have come to this small town in this other state that she didn't live in if she hadn't found our program online and been able to try it out in that way first. And her mom recently called me a cult leader, and she's not wrong. In a good way. So those are two kind of specific examples of what I see constantly doing the work I do, which is students finding a thing that that either allows them to shine or that they just find very interesting, and then the real special sauce is they find other people their age who are interested in that thing, who they can connect with about that thing, and then about other stuff. And they make friends and they form communities. And sometimes those communities go on to do theater. Yay. Sometimes they don't. Yay. But it's forging these connections between these young people who maybe don't have a lot of connections already forged for themselves. That is one of the biggest unexpected perks of my job and consequences of my job. And then just the increase in confidence that I get to see as students realize that this thing that they've been told is the hardest thing in the world, they're able to do it.
Yes, that's really amazing. Also, too, it made me think of, as I was prepping for this interview and looking at some of the programming you have available for these young learners, it looks like you work with classes, both in person and virtually. There's some virtual options to work with classes. So while we're talking about youth learners, can we share more about those opportunities with the Laughers?
Yeah. I mean, the virtual versions of our workshops were a byproduct of COVID, because every organization was evolving, right? So we have, hour to 60-minute to 90-minute workshops, a set of about 12 of them that are scaffolded. If you want to do them all, we have point A all the way to, Z. We can take you through all the levels, or you can sort of pick and choose and curate your own. We call it a Shakes Academy. You can curate your own experience with a grouping of workshops. But we offer those here in Stanton at on our stage or in our auxiliary workshop space, or we will go to a school if they're localish enough. And then when schools are far away, earlier this year, I did a virtual workshop of, I think it was our embedded stage directions for some kids up in Buffalo, New York, right?
Wow.
And I zoomed into their classroom and we did a thing, we did that workshop. And
those digital workshop opportunities are available to the general public as well. It's not just student groups. We have partnered with Roundtable and the 92nd Street Y. They have a whole suite of educational opportunities that they offer digitally, and we are now their partners. And I just wrapped up teaching a course on Hamlet that meets in Zoom once a week for an hour or two to talk about a specific one of our Shakespeare staging conditions aspects as it applies specifically to Hamlet. And we'll resume in October with a course on Taming of the Shrew. And those are open to the public. Anybody can sign up for them and get to learn a little bit more about the way that we do things here in our really, you can participate in these as much as you want to, right? They are designed to be seminar style. We like your input and we want to have conversations about it. But if you'd like to turn your camera off and have it be a webinar, we can also do that. And so that really is another low pressure, low commitment entry point into what we do here, if you have any interest in what we do here.
That's really great. This, I did not know or was not aware of this round 9. What is round 9?
Round table.
Round Table.
Yes, Round Table. So the 92nd Street Y in New York, they are the organization that started offering this content, and they partnered with Round Table. I believe Round Table is like the content provider. They have the like infrastructure to host the classes and like and get them out to the public and to do the marketing and whatnot. And so they reached out. We were connected with them via a third party, and they were like, "You've got classes, we've got students." And we were like, "You've got students, we've got classes." And so now we've got students and classes together.
And you can purchase them for asynchronous learning.
Yes.
So even if you miss the live session where you get to be recorded with Leah, those folks who got recorded with Leah, you can get those videos and enjoy them on your own time.
Yeah. And
anytime.
And they are designed to be something that you can enjoy and learn from asynchronously, even though there are people synchronously learning at the same time. So if you missed that Hamlet course, you can still go buy it at Round Table right now and enjoy it forever. I also did a course in the spring on As You Like It, and I'll be doing a course on Taming of the Shrew in the fall. So you can experience our digital programming from anywhere.
That's really great. Do you think you all would have walked down that road if it hadn't been for the pandemic?
No.
Yeah, probably not. Or at least not as quickly, you know. Probably not.
Needs must. And we didn't want to. What we do is very mindfully not on a screen. We put people in a room together, and we're not interested in trying to do badly what movies can do better. They have CGI. We have presence. So it was not a pivot we wanted to make. And I don't think that we would have made it if we didn't have to. And so,
but yeah, it's another tool in our toolbox now, and I'm grateful for this.
I'm very glad that we have it. It's helped us to make our programming more accessible to a wider range of students
and a wider reach generally.
Right, globally, in fact, because it's on the internet. That's pretty incredible. So I imagine there's people that have found out about you through that toolbox or through those resources that had never heard of you before.
Yes. I did get some great comments in my recent roundtable courses about, why have I not heard of you?
Probably because you're in New York and we're in Virginia.
I'm in Massachusetts. Why haven't I heard of you? I'm like, I don't know. Now you have. Come here.
Yeah, in person. You can see one of your performances too. It's really amazing space for Shakespeare. And of course, it makes sense because it's a replica of the first Shakespeare theater. Is that off? Or I see the heads like maybe a little bit.
Academics,
yes, that's sort of true.
It was a recreation and not a replica, by which we tried to get the vibe right, but unlike a Shakespeare's Globe, the reconstructed globe that stands in London now, it opened in 1997, that's a replica. They only used early modern materials and building techniques to build that building. We didn't do that. Shakespeare was never in Virginia. We used electricity and cranes and backhoes.
Yeah, and there's like indoor plumbing and AC and stuff.
And all that stuff. You're welcome. The first theater was actually built in 1596 by James Burbage, the manager of Shakespeare's company, and it was called The Theatre. Very creatively. And it was located in what is now Shoreditch to the north of London city proper. And it was a big outdoor playing space, kind of looked like what the Globe looks like.
Yeah, it was like a prototype of the Globe.
Yeah, really. It actually was. Yeah, indeed. It's literally what it was. And the Blackfriars did not open until 20-ish years later, 1597, when the land, the lease on the theater was up. And James Burbage wanted an indoor space instead because it's in a much nicer neighborhood and there's a roof. Everybody gets to sit down. It's all this great stuff. Yeah, it's going to be so fancy. And actually, they spent all their money constructing that playhouse, and then the neighbors sued them because they didn't want actors in their neighborhood. And the petition is actually hilarious. You can read it now. It's very funny. Like, it's very modern sounding. It's like, do you know who comes to plays? Do you want them in our neighborhood? And where are they going to park? Are you going to clean up after their horses? I don't think so. Do you know they play trumpets every day at 2 p.m.? Do you want that? Anyway, they were successful in keeping Shakespeare's company out of the Blackfriars. So then Shakespeare had to scramble with his company to build the Globe Theater, which they did out of the remnants of the original theater in Shoreditch. And it's not until King James has been on the throne for about 5 years in 1608 that Shakespeare's company actually gets into the Blackfriars Playhouse again and is able to perform there like they originally intended. And at that point, they are performing in both the Globe and the Blackfriars until the theaters close in 1642, although Shakespeare dies before then, and they burn down a few times also.
Wow.
The city of London was really flammable. They kept having those straw roofs. Like, that was a bad idea, guys.
Yeah.
Took a minute to figure that out.
Yeah.
Well, the first time the globe burned down, they did it was because of the thatch. And when they rebuilt it the first time, they built it with a tile roof because we learned from our mistakes. But the reconstructed globe has a thatch roof.
Well, but they put sprinklers on it.
So because it's the 21st century now.
Yeah.
I love that. I didn't realize all that history. So thanks for sharing that. You have so much richness to offer, both in the history and sharing that. And you're working with these youth and collaborating also with educators to integrate the Shakespeare into modern curricula. So we've talked about like the virtual programming, kind of the, what do I want to say? Original creation from your point of view that you create, and it's collaborative only when they take the class, but you're also collaborating with educators in real time to provide curricula. What does that look like?
Yeah, so there are a couple of different ways that we interact with teachers and students, and one of those, like you said, is sort of our workshops, where we come in and do a workshop. We're the entertainment for the students and the new shiny thing for the students that day as a guest. We also have teacher seminars a couple of times throughout the year where we teach teachers our tools, right, and show them our way of breaking down this material so that they can integrate that into their own plans that already exist and into the curriculum that they have to work with, depending on what state they're from. And I mean, it's a whole minefield right now, I'm sure you know. So we find ways like that to, we have study guides that are pretty flexible. And so we find that when we give teachers the tools, they can integrate them however they need to and what works for their students. And because they know their kids better than we ever will, So those study guides are really sort of the way in and the template for teachers who come and visit us and then take back things to their own districts.
And we also work with our marketing team and the artistic team to make sure that when we're programming our artistic year, we have curriculum titles in there.
Yes.
So that because we have a big student matinee program, and schools from all around the area, and sometimes not the area, will come to visit us for those shows. So Thursday mornings and sometimes Wednesday mornings throughout the school year, we have 10:30 a.m. performances for students. And that's probably the biggest way that we interact with the curriculum as a whole and with large swaths of the student and teacher population is by making it accessible for them to come and see the show instead of having to just read the book.
Right. Literally give them access to our theater and our performances. Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty fun. My son, we moved here when he was in 8th grade, and I know part of the curricula, they did go to Blackfriars Playhouse. As they should. But I imagine this has got to be such a jewel, like you had mentioned earlier, to give even younger people, younger than 8th grade, exposure to Shakespeare.
Oh, it's so fun. Yeah. I love student matinee season. The kids come in and, we've had groups, student groups as young as 3rd graders, come and sit in our house. And it's really fun to watch them get sucked into the action, whatever it is, and just because the lights are on, you can see their facial expressions. And one of my favorite things to do is to sort of sit like on the side of the stage and face more of the audience than, I can watch the actors whenever I want, but like I like watching the kids and watching their faces and like their reactions to everything. They're so extreme, when something weird happens or they just freak out. And it's one of the joys of seeing work in our playhouse is watching someone who's brand new to it, like a kid, experience a play and a story for the first time and just watch them lose their minds. It's really fun. And the actors love it. They love students.
I bet they do.
Liar.
Most of the time they do.
Yeah.
Most of the time they do.
It's early.
Yeah.
It is early. I imagine for some of the actors, 10:30. Well, they would have to be there earlier than that to prepare and get ready.
They don't like the early rising, but the payoff is pretty good. So
the payoff is exceptional. Leah, I wanted to ask you, what draws you personally to the world of Shakespeare, and how do you infuse your passion into the performances you help create?
So I was drawn to Shakespeare because I wanted attention as a kid, and it got me attention. I didn't like it. I didn't know anything about it, but my sister liked it, and that wasn't allowed. I had to have all the attention. And I have a pretty good head for verse. Like I can memorize things that have a meter pretty easily. So my parents thought that was a fun party trick, and they would have me memorize large swaths of text, and they'd trot me out at parties to like do all of Act 3, Scene 1 of Romeo and Juliet, which I can still do.
Wow.
They had the audacity to ask me recently, like, how did you get into what you do? I'm like,
were you there? Were you not paying attention?
So I really enjoyed being like a precocious young person who could like regurgitate this text, and I liked the attention it got me, so I just kept pretending to like it all the way until I had a degree from NYU in it. And then I was like, oh no, what do I do with my life? Because I didn't want to act. I'm not an actor. That it doesn't bring me joy. I think it's a stupid life choice and a terrifying one, and I'm glad that other people do it so that I have my job, but I don't want to do it. And I wasn't super interested in going into like teaching in the college level, or I wanted to be part of theater, and I didn't quite know how or in what way. And I also was kind of faking it. And when I came to Stanton to do an internship at the American Shakespeare Center, I had done a program at the Globe during college, and I wanted to get back there and run their education team. That was my 20-year plan, just spitballing. And then I came here in January of 2012 to do a 6-month internship and never left because we're better. I had never seen anything like it. And I promise I'm getting to the personal fandom. I met Dr. Ralph Allen Cohen.
Oh, wow.
And I enrolled in grad school eventually with him at Mary Baldwin University. And he does this thing that I call, he Ralphs people. And getting Ralphed is when this small Southern Jewish man comes up to you and goes, that thing you love? I love that thing. Let's love that thing together. And then you feel like really uplifted and excited about it. And he started breaking down the language for me and pointing. I learned about rhetoric. I learned about textual variation. I learned about the ways that like these shows were put together. And it was such a sigh of I got to breathe a sigh of relief because I was like, oh my God, I really do like this thing. I actually really like this thing. And the thing that I loved most about it was the way we do it here, was that interaction between actor and audience, was that feeling I got every time I walked into the Playhouse that I somehow mattered in some way, that it felt different and I couldn't figure out why. And so I wrote my first master's thesis on the neurological effects of deploying social cues in a theatrical space, specifically eye contact in the Blackfriars, because I was trying to figure out what is the thing. And I think that's the thing. I think that Shakespeare knew, I can't prove it, but I think Shakespeare knew this. I think Shakespeare used it on purpose. And I think that we are built in to the plays. I think the audience is a big part structurally of the plays that Shakespeare wrote, and recovering that, rediscovering that fact. I lost my little mind over it. I find it so exciting. And I love watching people, like Aubrey said, it's like a favorite thing for a lot of people who work here is watching people experience the Playhouse. But watching people specifically in the moment when they realize, oh my God, I could be pointed out next. I thought it was really funny when we were all pointing and laughing at that guy. And then I realized that it could be, if they can see him, then they can see me. And oh my God, it could be me next. Or, oh my God, it could be me next. Right. And that's the way people perk up. It's different than the kind of crushed velvet, polite theater that I am used to seeing Shakespeare in the context of. And I find that endlessly thrilling and endlessly rewarding. And I probably would have gotten bored by now if there was only one way to do these plays, even in these conditions, but there's so many. Every time we do Hamlet, it's different. And not because we're going to do it in space this time, just because there's so many choices you have to make. And a different director, a different team of actors, a different costume designer, whatever, they're going to make different choices every time. And so the play is the play, but it's so alive and vital that it always feels fresh in this particular Playhouse to me. Did I answer the question?
You did.
Okay.
I think you've demonstratively answered that.
Oh, right. And I have enthusiasm in spades is just on my resume.
Yeah.
It's just part of my
already.
I'm a very enthusiastic person. And I kind of can't help it. I mean, humans we are social creatures. Emotions are contagious. And when you get Ralphed, it's infectious. And I'm evangelical in my wanting to carry on that legacy of that thing you love. I love that thing. Let's love that thing together. And then we all feel excited.
Getting Ralphed. I think I need to meet this Ralph.
Yeah.
Well, you can.
Okay.
Every once in a while, he still makes an appearance at Friday Night Lights on, at least once per play.
Yes.
So at the very least, you can encounter Ralph at one of those.
Oh, that would be amazing. On your bio, Leah, it says that you're a dramaturg. And I had to look that up. So I'm thinking, we had Eiley Huber from Silk Moss Stage on our podcast, and we talked about it a little bit there, but I don't know if the laugher listening to this episode has listened to that one yet. So it's another great opportunity to educate people. What is a dramaturg?
Sure. So answers are going to vary depending on your theater and what you want, how you want to deploy that position, right? For us, and the way that I have done dramaturgical work for the American Shakespeare Center, it is mostly rooted in creation of the text. So like, where do our scripts come from? Because editors make a lot of choices, right? And so I use, when I'm creating scripts for the company, I am pulling them from an early modern text. So like this year's 2023 is the 400th anniversary of the publishing of the 1623 First Folio, or the first collected works of Shakespeare. And so we are using that text as the base text for our productions, but still spelling wasn't standardized. There's a lot of weird stuff in those plays. They need like a little bit of just editing for clarification and for formatting. So a lot of my work starts there. And then when I notice all the weird stuff in the text, I start to ask questions about it. And then I research those things. And then I come up with like, here's what might be going on here, right? So is this a typo? Is this a moment of textual variance? Is this something that editors have talked about? Is there a lot of controversy over this moment? And I will create a base text document that has a cleaned up version of whatever the early modern text is that we are using, along with hundreds upon hundreds of comments of me pointing out things about that text that I either think are interesting, are controversial, or that the director needs to make a choice about. Like we can do this or we can do this. And then the director has that to use as they are cutting the text for performance, because unless it's Comedy of Errors or The Tempest, it is really, really, really rare to see a play that has not been cut in some way for performance, just for length. Hamlet's 4 hours long. If you don't cut any of it, it's just,
wow.
That's too much Hamlet.
It's too much Hamlet.
Even if you love Hamlet, that's too much Hamlet.
And then in the rehearsal process, I am on hand to answer questions about the things in the text as they show up. So stuff about pronunciation, stuff about how am I related to this person? If it's a historical person, who am I? And why does that matter? Right. So any kind of questions about the world of the play that come up, I am kind of the official expert, and I sit in the corner and I know things silently until I am asked about them, and then I answer questions. I can also, because I create the scripts, I also end up being on book a lot in rehearsal because I can't help it, and so I'm there to help prompt the actors. But that's not something that every dramaturg will do. And I serve as a general outside eye. I'm there to help the director, or if there is no director, because we do directorless shows here still, to help the company to see what the audience is seeing and to say, okay, here's the story I am receiving from my seat in the audience. Is that the story we're trying to tell today? It is? Great. It's not? Okay, let's change some stuff. So it's not I'm not saying do this, do this, do this. I'm saying, here's what I'm seeing. I'm reflecting that back, right? So I'm trying to put myself in the as an audience avatar, as well as somebody who is deeply knowledgeable about Shakespeare and the context of the play that we are doing, so that I can answer as many questions as possible while still knowing that, hey, the playwright's dead and nobody knows what he intended, and I am not him, but he also died and made me him, so maybe I am. now. Yes, so that dramaturg is the kind of outside eye for a production and is there to serve the production and serve the story that's being told in whatever way is needed.
I love that. Thank you for that description. It was beautiful. Aubrey, Shakespeare's language can be daunting for newcomers, and we've kind of alluded to that earlier in this episode. How do you approach teaching the intricacies of his language, more specifically, and making it relatable?
Well, we have workshops on that.
Oh,
yeah. Well, several of the workshops in our workshops suite and series are about the words themselves. So one thing, we start at the very foundational level at sound, right, and at rhythm. So we have workshop on verse and like, what is iambic pentameter? How can it serve an actor, right? And it's not just the theory of iambic pentameter. It's always, how does this iambic pentameter inform and serve the production? We have another workshop where we break down rhetorical devices and rhetorical patterns. So, not just saying, oh, the candidate's rhetoric is so incendiary. We sort of break down like, what do we mean when we say rhetoric? We mean the arrangement of words, right? To say or make whatever meaning you want to make. And here are some patterns that we have noticed in the text. And here's how that can, again, inform an actor when they're making staging choices. So it's always, like we said before, it's always grounded in performance, because how are you going to know this stuff? Like, it's nice to what I love about our conference too, is that you get academics coming in being like, look at this line in this one bit of verse. And isn't that interesting? And yes, it is. That is a really cool thing that you have discovered about this text. But how do we perform that? How do we play that? How does that work when I'm looking at it on stage? So those are some of our ways in, and I've lost the thread of your question, but I hope I've answered it.
Yeah, I will just ask it just to be sure that you feel like you got all you wanted to say in there. It's just, how do you approach teaching the intricacies of his language and making it relatable?
Yeah.
The
roads to rhetoric.
Yeah.
Just break it down.
Yeah. And think about the impact on performance. Like, because people will get very intimidated by like large swaths of poetry, but
yes,
it's not like, bow stubborn knees and arms outstretched. It's like, if you're saying bow stubborn knees, like you're telling your knees to bow, you got to kneel. Like, it's not just or if I say like,
you got to do something
like, sir, peruse this letter, like that, I'm handing you something to read. Like, so it's just the demystification of what we think is poetry, but is also stagecraft, tends to be our biggest way.
Yeah. And, we combat a lot of trepidation too from people about like, oh, am I pronouncing this correctly? Mm-hmm. And that's where actually, we say the scansion helps. Scansion, for those who don't know, is the word we use when we say like, that's how you break down the pentameter, the meter of something. When you scan a work is where you're finding its rhythm. Mm-hmm. So, we know certain words are pronounced certain ways, which helps us sort of reverse engineer the scansion when we're not sure. And also, if you see a name or a word you're unfamiliar with, maybe try the iambic pentameter and figure out where the stresses are, and that'll help you pronounce that word. But also we're really into encouraging making mistakes with gusto. So
and Shakespeare mispronounces things a lot.
Yeah.
Like
Shakespeare didn't care. He was English.
The Tempest. They're constantly talking about Milan, right? Because people are from Milan, but the way that word is pronounced in that play is Milan. That is how it stands in there. If you say Milan, like, you're wrong, but you're right. But you're wrong because you're throwing, it doesn't work.
You're throwing off the verse while trying to be accurate to the current pronunciation of that city's name.
And try to tell that to a bunch of 8-year-olds performing the Tempest, because they will not have it. Saying Milan, that's stupid. And then eventually, after 14 weeks of like hearing the verse
and
over
fighting
and over
the
again
verse
and fighting it, they finally realize like, I see how the pattern works. But if Shakespeare was wrong, then you can be wrong too.
Yeah.
Like, fail spectacularly so that you can find the better way.
Yeah.
That's what workshops are for.
It's our approach.
Mm-hmm. It's a good approach. I want to ask you too, for our laughers, could you both share a little known or surprising fact about the theater or its productions that they might find very fascinating?
Okay, I'm going to do a fact about Shakespeare that they might find fascinating. There is no one version of Shakespeare's plays. None of his manuscripts and his handwriting survive. And we only have what's been funneled through the medium of print. And sometimes we have multiple versions of these plays that are all from around the same time period and have equal claims to authenticity, but we don't treat them that way. So most people don't know that the first version of Hamlet that was ever published varies in a lot of ways from the version of Hamlet that they're probably familiar with, including in the most famous line that we know as "to be or not to be, that is the question." And the first printing actually appears as "to be or not to be, there's the point." So there is no one text of Shakespeare, and everybody who is interacting with him has to make choices about which versions they want to use. And there is no answer key. There's no one right way to do it.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing people might not know about our space in particular and about our company is that well, at the same time that Dr. Ralph founded the American Shakespeare Center, when we opened our doors here in 2001, he also founded the Shakespearean Performance Program, the graduate program at Mary Baldwin. And through that program, through the several decades that it's been running now, research has come out from these brilliant students that has informed the way our playhouse now looks. So it was what it was in 2001 when we opened the doors. You will see when you come into our space, you will see tapestries on our walls now. And those are the result of a student's research project. And so we have this wonderful sort of reciprocal relationship with that program where the research the students are doing is always informing and enriching the performances that we do just by literally sometimes changing the space and the way it functions, just because new knowledge is being added to what we already have. It's a very cool thing.
The tapestries sound really great. What other interesting items are now there because of the students' research?
Some stuff we've discovered that we got wrong.
Because blueprints don't survive for this building. Right. We have the deed of sale between the previous owner and the manager of Shakespeare's company that tells us things like the price and the dimensions of the rooms,
right.
not the
placements of things necessarily. So we have this rose window in our space that we think actually should have been on the wall that's opposite to where it is now. Things that we've learned that our balcony, which juts out from the wall, actually probably should have been flush with the wall. And we discovered that because an actor had a really hard time rehearsing a particularly challenging moment and he just didn't have enough time. He had 2 lines to get from the balcony down into hell, which is our trapdoor.
So we think because of this, because they had these understage spaces, right? It's called hell, right? It's where ghosts and devils and demons enter from. And every Shakespeare playhouse, every playhouse Shakespeare worked in would have had this space, right? And then there's also a balcony above the stage that was a really common feature in these playhouses as well. And there are lots of moments, and not just Shakespeare plays, but other plays from the period, where a character needs to get from that balcony space to that below stage space in not enough time. And I think there was a fireman pole.
Or a slide or something.
Where I want, just from a scholarly perspective, I want my fireman pole.
Yeah. So we're constantly learning stuff like that from the students and their work. And, Leah's own contributions about eye contact, and mine was less useful. My thesis was less useful to our work, but hers was absolutely useful. So,
and mine, mine was, this is again a symbiotic relationship, because in the sense that, yes, the students are changing what we're doing on stage with their research. What we're doing on stage is informing their research. That's the whole point, right? Yeah. So I got interested in this eye contact thing because of what I was seeing on stage. And I spent a lot of time talking to actors about what they were doing to come up with what I ended up writing. And then now that informs what they continue to do. And so it's very symbiotic in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys, your passion for Shakespeare really shines through. And yes, it does. And before we wrap up here, I'm thinking also it just bleeds out beyond your jobs. And Aubrey, you have a podcast that's about Shakespeare. Can you tell and share the laughers for those that might be interested in learning more and hearing more about Shakespeare? They might be interested in that podcast as well.
Sure. Yeah. So the podcast that I run with my co-host, Dr. Jess Hamlet, who was actually in our graduate school cohort. We went to graduate school together at Mary Baldwin, in case you hadn't. One of our other classmates and I host the Hurly Burly Shakespeare Show. And we actually just put a pause on that because she is going into tenure and she's up for tenure this year. And she was like, no, we can't do there's too much right now. But we have 6 whole seasons of very sweary. So it's, R-rated language, but fun excavations of every play in the canon. We have it at sort of different discussion levels. So we'll give you a 101, an introductory, piece on every single play in Shakespeare's canon. If you just want an overview, and then there's sort of more in-depth conversations. We bring in guests. It's a good time. We play games. It's very silly. And again, very sweary. So
they may enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, thank you for that.
It is not at all affiliated with my work at the American Shakespeare Center. My opinions are my opinions only. I just need to say that as a disclaimer.
That's right. Well, we all have lives outside of our work too. And I just think it's very, fun that you take your passion outside your work and share it in another way. And I love and appreciate that. Well, as we wrap up here in our conversation, how best can the Laughers stay updated with the latest at American Shakespeare Center on social media or otherwise?
Definitely check out our website, AmericanShakespeareCenter.com. You can also find us on Instagram at Shakespeare CTR, Shakespeare Center CTR. Same thing on TikTok at Shakespeare CTR. And on Facebook, find us same way, American Shakespeare Center. You can also keep up with the goings on of the campers and some of our other educational programs, specifically on Instagram and Facebook at ASC Theater Camp. TheaterCamp. And you can also sign up for our mailing lists on our website, so you can hear about when we are doing specific things. That's the way to find us. Yeah,
that's all the ways. And Laughers will put all the ways that you can connect with them that they just mentioned in the show notes for you as well. And thank you for coming on the show, Leah and Aubrey. This has been super fun and enlightening, chatting up on all things American Shakespeare Center. You guys are amazing. This has been amazing. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having us.
It's been such a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yes, same here. Feel samesies. Laughers, you too can experience the magic of Shakespeare's world come to life when you get tickets to one of their upcoming productions, and or more intimately when you take one of their enlightening and soul-giving educational programs or opportunities. For more information and details, simply visit AmericanShakespeareCenter.com. That's AmericanShakespeareCenter.com. In the meantime, do take advantage of the discount from Prepopsterous using promo code LAUGH15 when you buy some at prepopsterous.com today. That way you can munch on it when you join me on next week's episode. And lastly, and most importantly, thanks for tuning in, Laughers. Out of all the podcasts out there, you picked us, and we think that's pretty darn special, just like you. Until next time, keep smiling. Bye. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Virginia is for Laughers podcast, brought to you by X2 Comedy. We'll be dropping a new podcast every Wednesday, so check back for another uplifting episode. Come to an X2 Comedy show or let us bring one to you. To find out more, head to x2comedy.com. Be sure to share this podcast with a friend, and until next time, cheers.